was watering some plants this morning in the shower, and I thought that maybe that would be a thing. Oh, here's something I can show you. This is interesting. Look at that right there. This is what's called a mealybug. Can you see that? They are the most annoying little bugs, and if you've had houseplants for any amount of times, you'll recognize these things. I've been battling these things for this past year. And what I've learned to do is I spray a little bit of isopropyl alcohol on here, of course, every time I see them. But for the most part, I'm not even going to get a paper towel. I'm just gonna, used to be kind of grossed out by them, but now I just pull them off with my fingers every time I see them. Fortunately, they're kind of few and far between these days. But what they'll do is they'll basically suck on your plant's leaves and do things like that to them. So mealybugs is one of the pests. I remember there was a time when I was first getting into houseplants and all that stuff, and I used to read about pests and stuff online, similar to when I would read about contamination when I was getting into mycology. But I used to kind of, stupidly feel like, oh, I would never have to deal with a pest because I don't buy my plants from places that have pests, and that's just something that wouldn't happen to me. Maybe the reason I was so paranoid about contamination when I started getting into growing mushrooms was because of my previous experience with not believing in. This is my miniature jade plant that I've had for quite a while, and I think it's coming along pretty good. I gave it a good trim. Every time you trim a jade plant, they branch off into 2 separate branches. So hopefully we get a pretty cool looking tree out of this thing at some point. Anyways, what was I just saying? Oh yeah, maybe it was my stupidly believing that I would never have to deal with any sort of a pest with my houseplants that made me so terrified of contamination and all that stuff when I got into growing mushrooms. But nonetheless, I seem to have got most of the problems that I have with my houseplants, pests and stuff, under control. This plant has a little bit of issues. Let me see if I can see any. There's a little bit of their dusty debris. Sometimes it's a little bit tough to identify them because some plants actually will excrete kind of white stuff, just the way that these little bugs do. And they also really love to get into the little cracks and the little crevices of plants. So they're pretty tough to get rid of. Because I actually saw one on that, I think it's called an African mask plant. We'll give this a little spray with isopropyl alcohol. And that's basically what I've done to treat all of the mealybugs I've ever found, is just picking them off manually and spraying them with isopropyl alcohol. I think I got my ZZ plant left in here. There it is. Okay. This is the coolest plant in the world. I forgot to water this thing, or I haven't watered it for maybe a month or even 2 months, and it's still popping out growth in the middle. This thing doesn't need barely any water. You see those tubers in the bottom? Those things are really good at storing up water. So this plant is kind of one of those rare ones that doesn't need to be in totally dry soil, but it is really drought resistant and can be in really dry soil. And it's one of those plants that you can just not water for until you actually think about it. In fact, that's probably best for it. And it's just a lot of fun. It has a really cool look, kind of like a waxy feel to the leaves as well.